How y'all doing? Thank you for joining me once again. Jordan Knight here. This is episode 8. You probably know that because you had to go in a roundabout way to find this video, I imagine. Jordan Knight Rev Tattoo on YouTube. Otherwise, you'll find the new kid on the block. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And I know that sounds a bit selfish, but I can tell you each time new content is posted, you'll get an email. You won't have to wait for me to share it on social media and scroll through some news feed just to find it. But whatever got you to watch this video today, hey, I'm blessed that we're together. To whatever extent that is, I'm just going to trust and believe the love of God is alive in you, alive in me. Hey, Sacred Heart, Dwight Schrute is here. I got me a cup of coffee. Like to drink it out of a good mug. Today we got one of my grandfather's Burlington Northern coffee mugs. God bless y'all. Grab your Bible. I got mine here. I told you big changes coming here. We've been in the Gospel of Mark for a few weeks. I'll tell you what, we're going to get into the Gospel of Matthew here for a little while. It's just the Gospel that I've been reading in my personal times of studying the Bible. And, I guess I should say we're going to be in Matthew chapter 8. And this is just after what church-going folks might call the Sermon on the Mount. That's chapter 5 through 7 of Matthew's Gospel. And the leadoff is maybe another churchy word you've heard before, the Beatitudes. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the poor in spirit. It's got all those sayings to it. Jesus goes on to talk about prayer and talk about missions and talk about giving and talk about marriage and talk about faithfulness and all these different aspects. And, scholars want us to believe that this probably wasn't just one time up on the mountainside where many times we're told Jesus is using that landscape as a platform to minister and to teach people. That this collection is a collection or a series of those type of events as he traveled throughout the region he was living in. Probably not a one service whole sermon, as it were. So Sermon on the Mount, bit misleading, but I just tell you that so I could get lost down a rabbit hole. Let's hope I don't get lost down too many more today. One of the things I've come to learn is Matthew doesn't tell his stories of Jesus chronologically. They're arranged more by topic. And, I should stop there and just get you to focus on something that my mind has been thinking on a lot recently. And that's why this part of Matthew stuck out to me. I've been thinking a lot and talking a lot and hearing from folks just recently about sensory type of things, what you see, what you hear, what you taste, what you touch, what you smell, and the parts of your body that do all these functions, and how throughout our lives, these senses, they somewhat stay the same, but they also change. And then there comes a point in time, there's a point in time where we're birthed and all these senses take off in an explosive, creative, very human way, and then in that same human way they all come to an end. And many times they change and come to an end before we take our last breath. So I would ask you to think about these senses that you have, that you and I so many times take for granted. And then I would ask you to think of, what is the worst disease that you can think of? I mean, what illness, what type of horrible suffering scares you the most? And maybe you've got more than one option. Maybe you could say all of the above, but I want you to maybe think kind of specifically. Is there a particular name, a diagnosis, something that you know to be the worst, most terrible disease you have ever heard of? What's that terrible sickness? Think about that as we move into Matthew chapter 8, where Jesus is telling a series, because Matthew is doing things topically. It's a series of miracle stories, and Jesus is demonstrating that he has kingdom power in this life. And that's what I'd want to encourage you to believe in today and every day. That if you have a hope for heaven, its expression, that kingdom of heaven, is alive and should be alive and can be viewed, can be witnessed in this human life. I think we're getting glimpses of perfection in the here and now that will point us towards what we hope is eternal perfection. That being said, quite the challenge before us. Jesus is doing all these miracles, and the first miracle he's going to do in Matthew chapter 8, it involves a guy who's estranged from all life because of a dreaded disease, the scariest disease that he and many others of that day and age or ours could imagine. Let's read verse 1 together, and then we'll break it apart, talk about it a little bit. Matthew chapter 8, verse 1. When he came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him. Let's stop. First off, anytime we see Jesus in Matthew's gospel, we're going to see a crowd. And ask yourself, as I ask myself, who's in this crowd? You got to imagine Jesus has celebrity at this time. So if we're in a place where celebrity happens upon us, who's in that crowd? Well, you could say anybody who was around, everybody who was around, and you had a majority of them being nobodies. Jesus is the somebody. If you're in the crowd with the famous person as the focal point, you're not nearly as important as that person. You're a nobody in the crowd. Now, there's different levels of nobodies within that crowd. You got to imagine the same structure here. Jesus is the somebody. The people who want to be or used to be or try to be the somebodies, they're what's classically called the Pharisees, the religious leaders, the religious know-it-alls. These are the power and the authority and the wealthy. They are the quintessential 1% of their day, and we are the 99. And at various levels, we're all mixed into this crowd. But you imagine it is a crowd full of beat up and beleaguered and cast out and nobodies and everybody's and somebody's and so many people without a name. But you have a name. You have a life. You have a family, quite possibly, a job, a purpose, a passion, an interest, a hobby. Man, you are quite special. Are you somewhere in this crowd when Jesus is happening by? And what are your five senses telling you? And in this crowd of chaotic people of all sorts of backgrounds and types, this guy is in the crowd, and he's got leprosy. And we'll talk more about that in a minute, but he's in this crowd too. And it says this crowd, everybody was astonished. Now, another way of taking that word, it means that they were amazed or out of their minds in amazement. I'd ask you to ponder that. Maybe you need to press pause and ponder a time in your life where you were out of your mind with amazement, that this crowd was captivated. They were captivated because the things that they saw him do, nobody did. And if you saw somebody do things that no other human being could do, man, fear evoking, but you couldn't get enough of it. You couldn't turn away, and so they followed. This crowd followed Jesus pretty near wherever he went. You got a dude with leprosy in the crowd, and we'll continue with the second verse. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. So I asked you to think about what's the worst disease around today. What disease terrifies you the most? You know, there are many illnesses that have no cure. And even those with cures, you know, they don't have great percentage chances in terms of overall success, do they? Well, you can imagine with healthcare in our modern world versus when Jesus is living, there's a lot of adversity there. And in Jesus's day, a common illness that so many people feared was called leprosy. Now, we, pretty disconnected from maybe that type of disease, but I would say many of us are pretty disconnected from all types of diseases. As much as we can, we try to keep our lives away from dying and the things that lead us to death. Now, what's life like for a leper when Jesus is walking around on this day? And I just ask you to ponder, what's life like for anyone who suffers? Right off the bat, you got somebody that's dealing with their own mortality, Many times you got people around them that because they love this person, they're right in the thick of things. And you got all different branches and breaks off within family and friendships when this intense suffering is around. And then you get into isolation, you get into depression, feeling like you are the other because of the hand that you are forced into playing. And so if you're facing this sort of thing and you've got this diagnosis and you've got the signs and the symptoms, you got to go before a priest, because you and I, we might go off to see our primary physician. We might be blessed that we see a specialist or a series or a team of doctors and specialists. None of that is happening in Jesus's day. Pretty much the church, I mean, the Jewish community and its synagogue, its temple, and its leadership, politician and doctor and priest and teacher and so many other hats are worn by this one institution that kind of is, everything to Jesus and everyone else living in this world. So you go to the priest sees the signs and the symptoms, and they do declare a diagnosis, and they banish you or anybody else that has this diagnosis, banish from home, from family, from the city, the town, the village in which you live. Can't even live in the city limits now. They were completely excluded from all social, all religious, all community activities. And again, in this part in history in the world, that's all housed in and with the religion, the faith practice. And they, meaning anybody with this diagnosis, they'd have to go live in a community of others with other terminal illnesses, much like their own, until they either got better or they died. And most people die. Almost everyone dies. I mean, I'm talking about then, y'all. But you might have got confused and think I'm talking about now, and I'm thinking about nursing homes, or I'm thinking about homes that look like all the rest of ours, but inside that home, man, there's somebody fighting for that next breath, thinking it might be the last, and many hoping it will not be the last, yet hoping it will be the last. And if you caught in that gray area, that is the thin line that separates life and death, you know how shallow, yet how deep it all is. I'm sorry you got to bridge that gap today if you're in the thick of things. I hope this message will meet you right where you're at. And if you know what I'm talking about, but you're not in the thick of that right now, but you've gotten a taste of it before, you can see that suffering spans the test of time, but so does love. And that love, we believe, is Jesus Christ. All right, let's get back to it now. Here's what we know about a leper with no name, because this dude has no name in the story, okay? He took a really big risk when he went and said what he said in front of this crowd, because he's already breaking so many rules by going back to the community he's been excluded from. And he not only talks to Jesus, he knelt. And this kneeling is significant because it shows this man is entering into a time of worship. And I think so many of us get confused that means 10:30 on a Sunday morning in a building with some other like-minded individuals. Can it mean that? Yes. Does it only mean that? No. Worship can happen where you are in the midst of all that you're going through. And we see it here in this story, and I see it in the regular of people that I meet all the time that'll be the first to tell me they ain't been to church in years. And then we get together in fellowship because life and love and suffering bring us together. And I remind them, man, we've been to church, y'all. I'm blessed to be with church, blessed to be with it no matter where I am, no matter what's going on. And we see this leper taking a great risk to worship Jesus in this chaotic, this overwhelming, gripped with fear and amazement and follow Jesus anywhere type of crowd. And he kneels before Jesus. And this also shows us humility, reverence, recognition In a crowd that is very curious, but they're not entirely sold on who Jesus is. It's as if this leper knows exactly who Jesus is, and his actions show this recognition. His words reveal his faith, and his actions support his words. Man, wouldn't you like that to be true? When people hear your name, when people see you coming, they say, man, this dude's words, this woman's faith, their actions, they support one another. Oh man, I want that kind of life. Bummer that this dude has to be a leper for everybody to see that truth. Does the illness make that possible? What do you think? Your loved one who's suffering and dying. Is their illness making it possible for you to grow? Is it giving you an opportunity to be your better, best self? That's a tough question. Or is it an all-loving God? Oh, did I just say that? Would an all-loving God cause this suffering so that you might experience or find or cultivate or grow love in unimaginable ways that seem impossible? Would God orchestrate that? Would he write that into the plan? Would he craft this? Would he be a potter and us the clay working through illness? Would God use illness? Would God cause illness? Would God send illness? I got questions about that. So do you. I'll say this, and then I'll shut up about that and get on to other business. I think God often uses our point of need as a space to make himself known. I'll repeat that. God often uses our point of need to make himself known. So no matter the answer, what the leper asks for is this huge request. It's this big, huge risk. He wants to be a person again. He wants to be reunited with his family again. He wants to be a part of his community and his world again. Verse 3, Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing. Be clean. Jesus showed, what I believe he showed is that love and power work together in a heart of compassion. When love and the power that one possesses within the self, when they get all combined, a heart of compassion, meaning that you care more for the needs of the other than for the needs of the self. Yet all people shun lepers. Now broaden that word out, okay? Contagious, uncurable disease. And what do you know that to be? I tell you what, in this community alone, let's rattle a few names off. Serenity of Lake Story, Heartland, Marigold, Seminary Village, Hawthorne Inn, Knox County Nursing Home, Community. I'm gonna mess them up now. I visit so many. Assisted living and long-term care facilities. Do you visit them unless you have to? Unless you need to? I mean, nobody wants to live at these places. Nobody wants to have to visit somebody they love at these places because nobody wants to be a part of the terrible illness and disease because that stuff is nasty. Yet, given enough time and opportunity, it seems to find its way to everyone because death finds its way to everyone. And death is, well, you can hear people say it's beautiful, but you got to find beauty in what's ugly, y'all. And death can be just that. Okay. This leper, this person facing this terrible illness and disease, he wanted all that stuff taken away. And Jesus reached out and touched this man, and he spoke to him too. And we just went over how all of us, y'all, as much as we might deny it and say that we don't. We try to push illness and disease and the awfulness and the ickiness of it, and that is real people, and we try to shun it away, push it away, sweep it under the rug, get it away from me, get it away from here. That's not a part of our normal everyday life. All those people with that type of stuff going on, they go over here. But Jesus, with a heart of compassion, he reached out his hand and he touched someone with a dreaded, contagious illness. Haven't we been living that in the last year plus? When the touch was the only medicine you had to offer, and you felt like you was breaking a rule by laying a hand or offering a hug or, God forbid, shaking somebody else's hand. Jesus showed his willingness and ability to meet the social outcasts. And Jesus showed his ability to meet people where they're at with their most basic of needs, for somebody to talk to them, for somebody to hear their risky, hope-filled, outrageous requests, for somebody to not only listen to it, but believing that it could somehow be answered, and in doing it with just a touch. There's a pop song from the 90s called Just a Touch of Love. You go listen to this song after this message. See if it don't get you going. All right. The second part of verse 3. Immediately he was cured of his leprosy. As the man was rotting to death, y'all. As this man who had a family. Oh, air conditioner is starting up. I hope that doesn't ruin the sound quality of this illustrious. Oh man, my notes are falling. It's all just getting haywire here, y'all. Let me set things back up. I thank y'all so much for being with me today. The second part of verse 3 in chapter 8. Immediately cured of his leprosy. So this guy's rotten to death, yet he's still alive. And I'm telling y'all, before that final breath is taken, the presence of death is already active. And the 5 senses that you possess, yeah, you're going to pick up on the signs and symptoms. And this man had that going on in spades, so you know everybody in the crowd was picking up on what he was laying down. Yet here we are, he's kneeling before Jesus, remember? He's in a time of worship in this fear-stricken, captivated audience, and Jesus speaks to him and touches him, and we don't know exactly or for how long or in just the very detailed way in which this touch was given and received, but we understand that it was, and this man was healed. Now I ask myself, and I ask you, did he regain not only clean skin, because this was a skin disease where people were literally rotting, sores and cuts and wounds that would not heal and only fester and get infected. And many times what would happen is that a person's appendages would rot off. They'd lose fingers and toes. A common place for leprosy to really feature itself and scary enough is a person's nose. A person's nose, the cartilage here, gone. And if you've ever seen a drawing or if you've ever seen a skeleton in real life, oh man, Tales from the Crypt, y'all. Yeah, I mean, put that before you. I ain't never had that put before me when this message was preached at church. Why not? Because we disconnect it all. We don't have nothing to do with the lepers of our day. Get them folks away from us. Put them in the home. Get them in the hospital, and I won't go to either. That's the sentiment of many. Yet it's not what Jesus is doing. He touched somebody with a dreadful, uncurable disease. So did this man's toes and fingers come back? Did his nose get regrown, get reborn? What happened there? Whether all this happened or whether he remained disfigured yet healed, what we understand is that he could once again return to his community, which would lead us to believe, Jesus wouldn't send this man off looking the part of a leper while not being one. You get what I mean? Fully restored, fully healed is kind of what we imagine this story to imply in every sense of the word. Verse 4, then Jesus said to him, see that you say nothing to anyone, but go show yourself to the priest, offer a gift that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. Jesus didn't want to be a miracle worker, y'all, in some sideshow. He just didn't. He don't want you to be either. He doesn't want you peddling snake oil. And he doesn't need you lying to people, because he wasn't about that business either. The phrase I like, and I have resonated on many times from a beloved friend who's now with the Lord, as they say, the truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. Yeah, we're laying down some truth today, but you might have already been pissed off when you pressed play on this video. You already had upsets and hurts. Man, that's might be the reason I know most of y'all who go out of your way to watch this dude, man. And what sort of authority am I on all of this? I don't know, man. I'm broken and messed up and sinful and confused, and you might say the same, yet, man, I'm alive and I love and I embrace it all because Jesus is about that business, and he brings out a lot of good in me, and you've been blessed to receive it, and I would say the same about you. And that's no praise on myself, that's praise on Jesus Christ, that even in our flawed brokenness, man, the perfect makes the broken work pretty good, doesn't he? I'm going to try to wrap this up, y'all. Sometimes I get lost down rabbit holes, and man, sometimes it's fun to get lost, and if we're lost today, at least we're lost together. I think we need to understand here that Jesus is accused a lot of times for breaking strict rules that religious people were enforcing on everyone. But here he shows that he's really into following the rules, because he says, go follow these rules and present yourself before the priest. And what we got to understand here is Jesus is rebellious, but he's not anti-law. He's just uncommon among uncommon people. That's a David Goggins quote there, okay? The gist of that meaning that the religious know-it-alls, the one percenters, he was uncommon amongst those uncommon. I mean, if you want to say like Michael Jordan, you know, any other LeBron James, a super athlete, somebody that transcends the sport in which they play, hey, you know life is not a sport. And this man we call Jesus, believing to be the Son of God, he's fulfilling laws. He's not only keeping rules, he's the only one that can keep them perfectly and fulfill them all. And that's the big difference between he and anybody else that is uncommon. And that's what makes Jesus uncommon amongst the uncommon. Can you walk in that light? Today is an opportunity to be about that business, to work towards being about that business. And the question remains, why call this dude to silence? Why shut up the leper? I think because in doing so, Jesus set the priest up. He took the enemy, he took his arch nemesis, and he used them as the vehicle, as the way to proclaim the truth, y'all. You see what he did there by telling this leper to be quiet? This guy that got healed, he's like, hey, don't you say nothing. This dude, these people, this institution that's always putting me down, that's always saying to live one way yet live another, they're going to be the ones to proclaim the truth that has been borne witness by you in this crowd. And the priest will be the witness. The priest will be the priest will be forced into being the believer of what he, man, I messed that up. The priest himself is forced into being the believer of what he simply finds to be unbelievable. I butchered that a little bit, but I hope you get what I mean. The story ends with the leper disobeying Jesus' instructions. Oh, what an anticlimactic thing. Why? Maybe just to offer us a glimpse of reality and human nature and the truth that God loves sinners and God loves scribblers. And if you feel like you got a scribbly life going on right now, Jesus loves you, and I need that love too. How can we bring this all home, y'all? Most of us prefer words coming from the mouth of a person we can trust. And trust requires tangible proof and demonstrations of a person's values. Friends, in your actions, in your words, show support for the other in answering the how and the why questions of this life and in this world with your words, but most importantly with your actions. And for Jesus' sake, tell other people about him and show them how much you care. Now, friends, go forth and multiply, spiritually speaking.